Captain Sarah Vaughn stood on the observation deck of the UNS Resolute, watching the slow spiral of a dying star. Her reflection in the armored glass showed a woman in her late 40s, sharp jaw, tired eyes, a scar running from her left temple to her ear. That scar was a gift from the First Contact War 30 years ago. She'd been 17 then, watching her home colony burn. Now she commanded humanity's most advanced dreadnought, and she had never once fired first. "Captain, priority distress signal," came Lieutenant Merrick's voice over the ship's comm. "The Dorian mining colony. Krill fleet incoming. They're asking for evacuation." Sarah didn't turn. "How many ships?" 200, sir. We're the only human vessel within 6 light years. 200 against 1. The math was suicidal. But the Dorian colony held 12,000 civilians, miners, families, children. Sarah closed her eyes. She remembered the screams of her own childhood. The Krill had come then too, swarming out of the void, their chitinous ships blotting out the sun. Humanity had been young, naive, thinking diplomacy mattered. They learned otherwise. "Sound general quarters," Sarah said, her voice flat, "and open a channel to the Krill War Master." On the bridge, the crew moved like clockwork. Sarah took her chair, a simple metal seat with no cushions because comfort made you slow. The holographic display flickered to life, revealing the Krill War Master, a towering insectoid with compound eyes that reflected her own face back at her. His mandibles clicked in amusement. "Human," he said, his translator dripping contempt. "You are alone. Your colony will be harvested. Your ships will burn." Sarah leaned forward. "You've ignored 17 diplomatic warnings this year alone. You've raided 3 outposts, and now you threaten civilians. We are Krill. We take what we need." "No," Sarah said softly. "Humans don't start fights, War Master. But we finish them." The Krill laughed, a dry, chittering sound. "With 1 ship?" Sarah cut the channel. She turned to her weapons officer, a young woman named Ensign Tuan, whose hands trembled slightly. "Prepare the lullaby." The bridge went silent. Everyone knew what that meant. The lullaby wasn't a weapon of destruction. It was a weapon of unmaking, a resonance cascade designed to disrupt the Krill's neural hive link. It would leave the pilots alive but screaming in isolation, their minds shattered by sudden silence. "Captain," Tuan whispered, "the energy cost. We'll be vulnerable for 30 seconds after firing." "I know." Sarah looked at her crew, 200 souls who trusted her. She thought of the children on Dorian. She thought of her own mother, who didn't survive the First Contact War. "Engage the Krill fleet," she said, "and may whatever gods are listening have mercy on them." "Because I won't." The Resolute surged forward and the Krill swarm turned to meet her. The Krill attacked like a wave of broken glass, hundreds of plasma bolts streaking toward the Resolute. Each impact painted the view screen in shades of angry orange. The ship shuddered, alarms bleeding, but the shields held. They always held. "Shield integrity at 82%, called out Chief Engineer Voss, a grizzled man with cybernetic fingers. "They're hitting hard, Captain." Sarah watched the tactical display. The Krill had formed a classic encirclement pattern, herding their prey before the kill. They were arrogant. They'd never faced a human dreadnought in full combat. The last time humanity fought the Krill, they'd used obsolete cruisers and desperate courage. That was 30 years ago. Humanity had learned. "Hold fire," Sarah commanded. "Let them waste their ammunition." Ensign Tuan's hands hovered over the weapons console. "Captain, if we don't—" Did I stutter? The bridge fell silent except for the percussive thunder of plasma impacts. Sarah counted the seconds. 12,000 people on Dorian were loading into evacuation shuttles right now. Every second she bought was another family saved. "Captain," Merrick interrupted, "the War Master is hailing us." "Put him through." The holographic display showed the Krill commander, his mandibles dripping iridescent fluid, a sign of agitation. "Human, you are a fool. Your shields will fail. Your ship will crack. And we will feast on your marrow." Sarah tilted her head. "Is that supposed to frighten me? I grew up eating ration bars that tasted worse than your marrow." The War Master's compound eyes narrowed. "You mock us. I'm buying time." Sarah stood, walking closer to the display until her face filled his view. "Here's the thing about humans, War Master. You think we're weak because we negotiate. You think our patience is cowardice. But every time you've attacked our colonies, we've documented it. Every ship you've destroyed, we've analyzed. Every weakness in your hive network, we've mapped." She smiled, a thin, cold expression. You didn't start a battle today. You started a demonstration, the War Master screeched and cut the channel. On the tactical display, the Krill formation shifted. They were charging their main cannons for a simultaneous barrage. The Resolute couldn't survive that. Now, Sarah whispered, fire the lullaby. From the bow of the Resolute, a wave of invisible energy erupted. Not light, not sound, but a harmonic resonance tuned to the exact frequency of Krill neural tissue. The effect was instantaneous. On the view screen, Krill ships didn't explode. They stumbled. Their coordinated formation dissolved into chaotic spirals. Some ships crashed into each other. Others went dark entirely, their pilots unconscious from sensory overload. The hive mind, billions of years of evolution shattered like glass against a single human note. Sarah watched without emotion. Now they see why we don't start fights. But on the edge of the display, a single Krill frigate hadn't been affected. It was too far from the resonance wave. And it was heading straight for the Resolute, not to fire but to board. The boarding klaxon blared, a sound Sarah hadn't heard since her first command. It meant enemy life forms were inside the hull. It meant the ship was bleeding. Seal the bridge, she shouted. But the blast doors were already closing. Too slow. A Krill warrior burst through the gap. 7 feet of chitin and muscle, blade arms slick with hydraulic fluid from the maintenance corridors. Behind it, 3 more. Lieutenant Merrick drew his sidearm and fired. The plasma rounds pinged off the Krill's armored carapace like rain on steel. The creature lunged, impaling Marek through the shoulder. He screamed, "Tuan, keep firing the lullaby," Sarah ordered. "Don't stop until every Krill ship is disabled." "But Captain, the power drain, do it!" Sarah moved. She'd spent 30 years training for this moment, not in simulations, but in the brutal close-quarters drills that humanity had perfected during the First Contact War. The Krill were stronger, faster, armored like tanks. But they had one weakness: their eyes. She slid across the deck, yanked the ceramic knife from her boot, and drove it upward into the nearest Krill's compound eye. The creature shrieked, a sound like tearing metal, and collapsed, its neural system in shock. Sarah rolled, grabbed Marich's fallen sidearm, and fired into the second Krill's mouth as it opened to bite. The third Krill slammed her against the command chair. She felt ribs crack. Her vision blurred. The creature raised a blade arm for the killing blow, and Ensign Tuan shot it in the back of the head with a plasma rifle. "Captain, are you—" "Get Marish to medical," Sarah gasped, pushing herself up. The bridge was a slaughterhouse. 2 crew members were dead. Merrick was bleeding out, but the blast doors finally sealed, and the remaining Krill on the ship were being hunted by security teams. On the view screen, the Krill fleet drifted in silent chaos. Hundreds of ships disabled, thousands of pilots screaming in their cockpits as their hive mind dissolved into white noise. The lullaby had done its work. Status, Sarah coughed. Chief Engineer Voss's face appeared on a secondary display. He was pale. "Captain, we lost main power during the boarding action. The lullaby's resonance array is offline. And the Krill flagship. It's still moving," Sarah looked. The War Master's ship, a massive dreadnought twice the size of the Resolute, had shielded itself behind 2 smaller vessels during the resonance wave. It was intact, and it was turning toward Dorian. "He's going to ram the colony," Tuan whispered. "Even disabled, that ship's mass will crack the planetoid open." Sarah calculated distances. The Resolute had no weapons, no shields, no power for evasive maneuvers. But she had one thing left. "Tuan, plot an intercept course. Maximum thrust." "Captain, that's suicide. The reactors will—" I said plot it, because 12,000 civilians were still evacuating, and Sarah Vaughn had promised herself 30 years ago that she would never again watch a colony burn. The Resolute shuddered as its emergency thrusters ignited, a crude, bone-rattling acceleration that pinned everyone to their seats. Sarah gripped the armrests, feeling her cracked ribs grind. The view screen showed the Krill flagship growing larger, its jagged hull filling the void. "Time to intercept?" she asked. 4 minutes, Tuan replied, her voice tight. "Captain, the reactors are at 200%. They'll melt down before we hit. Then we'll melt." On the Krill ship, the War Master opened a channel. His compound eyes were wild now. The lullaby had damaged even his shielded vessel. His mandibles clicked in fragmented patterns, his hive mind dissolving into solitary terror. Human, he rasped. You have destroyed my fleet. My children scream in the dark. But I will still take your colony. I will grind your bones to paste. Sarah stood, ignoring the pain. She walked to the center of the bridge, directly in front of the holographic display. You want to know why I'm not afraid of you, War Master? She pulled up her sleeve, revealing a scarred forearm, the skin grafted from burns. 30 years ago, your species attacked my colony, New Harbin. I was 17. My mother told me to run. I didn't. I watched her die in front of me while a Krill warrior tore her apart. I was the one who found her arm 3 days later under a collapsed building. The bridge was silent. I joined the fleet the next week. I spent 15 years learning everything about your species. Your biology, your tactics, your hive mind. And I discovered something. Sarah smiled, a terrible, sad smile. You're not warriors. You're parasites. You only attack when you outnumber the enemy. You only fight when victory is guaranteed. The moment you face an equal, you crumble. We are Krill. We are the apex. You're bullies, Sarah interrupted. And I've been waiting 30 years to prove it. She turned to Tuan. Cut thrusters. Redirect all remaining power to forward shields. But we'll lose momentum. We're not ramming anymore. We're boarding. The War Master's eyes widened. You're insane. No, Sarah said, strapping on a magnetic grapple and checking her sidearm. I'm finished. She led the boarding party herself. 12 volunteers, all of them veterans of the First Contact War. They crossed the void on magnetic tethers, silent and deadly. When they breached the Krill flagship's hull, the War Master was waiting. He had a plasma cannon. Sarah didn't hesitate. She fired 3 shots, 2 into the cannon's power cell, 1 into the War Master's knee joint. The creature collapsed, screeching. She walked up to him, pressed her boot against his thorax, and leaned down. You have 2 choices, she said. Surrender, or I cut out your compound eyes one by one and leave you to drift. The War Master's mandibles trembled, and then the Krill flagship's engines detonated. The explosion tore through the Krill flagship like a fist through paper. Sarah felt the shockwave hit her, a crushing, burning pressure that threw her across the wreckage. She slammed into a bulkhead, her sidearm flying from her grip. The War Master's body disintegrated beside her, chitin and ichor vaporizing in the plasma fire. Captain, Tuan's voice crackled through the damaged comm. The reactors are cascading. The whole ship will go in 90 seconds. Sarah pushed herself up. Around her, the boarding party was dead, charred corpses floating in zero gravity. She was alone, trapped inside a dying ship with no way back to the Resolute. But the Krill flagship was still moving. Its collision course with Dorian hadn't changed. Even as it tore itself apart, its mass would destroy the colony. Tuan, get the Resolute clear, Sarah ordered, limping toward the flagship's emergency bridge. Take the crew and evacuate the colony. What about you? I'm going to finish this. She found the auxiliary command station, a small console designed for backup pilots. The War Master had locked the navigation systems, but Krill encryption was primitive. Sarah had broken it 100 times in simulations. Her fingers flew across the interface, rerouting thruster controls, overriding safety protocols. 70 seconds. The flagship's hull screamed as it entered Dorian's thin atmosphere. Sarah could see the colony now, a cluster of domes and mining rigs, evacuation shuttles still lifting off. She aimed the dying ship toward the empty plains, away from the domes. 50 seconds. You did this to yourself, she whispered to the War Master's corpse, drifting past her. We gave you 17 warnings, 17 chances to walk away. 30 seconds. She set the collision course, locked the controls, and turned toward the only escape pod still functional. But when she hit the release, the hatch sparked and jammed. Damaged in the explosion. 10 seconds. Sarah sat down in the command chair. She pulled up a holographic display and recorded a final message. Not for the fleet, not for command, but for every human who would ever hear it. Humans don't start fights, she said, her voice calm despite the flames licking at the viewport. We negotiate. We compromise. We offer peace 1,000 times. But if you push us, if you threaten our children, our colonies, our way of life, this is how we end it. The flagship hit the plains. The explosion was visible from orbit, a blooming fire flower that turned night into day. Tuan watched from the Resolute's bridge, tears streaming down her face. Chief Engineer Voss removed his cap. The entire crew stood in silence. Dorian was safe. 12,000 civilians lived, but Captain Sarah Vaughn was gone. The beacon's signal was weak, a faint ping buried under layers of debris and radiation. Lieutenant Merrick, his shoulder bandaged but functional, stared at the display in disbelief. "That's Captain Vaughn's personal identifier. It's coming from the crash site." "Impossible," Tuan whispered. No one could survive that, but humans had survived worse. Humans had survived the First Contact War, the fall of New Harbin, the dark years when colonies burned and children became soldiers, and Sarah Vaughn had always been the hardest to kill. "Launch a recovery shuttle," Merrick ordered. "I'm going down there myself." The crash site was a hellscape. Molten metal, shattered chitin, pockets of plasma fire that burned without oxygen. Merrick found the beacon inside a crumpled escape pod, its hatch fused shut. He had to cut through with a plasma torch, his hands shaking. Inside, Sarah Vaughn was unconscious, her body a patchwork of burns and shrapnel wounds. Her left leg was broken in 3 places. Her right arm was charred black to the elbow. But she was breathing. She was alive. How? Merrick whispered, lifting her as gently as he could. The medical bay of the Resolute became a battlefield of its own. Surgeons working through the night, grafting synthetic skin, repairing bones with alloy pins. Sarah drifted in and out of consciousness, mumbling words that sounded like coordinates, names, dates. New Harbin, she whispered once. Grid 7. Building 12. Find her arm. Chief Engineer Voss sat beside her bed, holding her good hand. She saved 12,000 people today, he told the crew. She saved them by burning herself alive. When Sarah finally woke 3 days later, the first thing she saw was a view screen showing Dorian's intact domes, its evacuation shuttles returning, its children playing in the artificial sunlight. The second thing she saw was her own reflection, gaunt, scarred, missing half her hair. "Did we win?" she asked, her voice a rasp. Tuan laughed through her tears. "Captain, you turned their flagship into a crater. The Krill are sending surrender terms through the diplomatic corps. The entire galaxy is talking about you." Sarah closed her eyes. "I didn't do it for the galaxy." "I know," Tuan said. "You did it for the ones who couldn't fight back." That evening, Sarah stood with crutches and gritted teeth at the memorial wall on the Resolute's observation deck. She touched a name she'd added decades ago. Elena Vaughn, mother. "I kept my promise," she whispered. No more burning colonies. Behind her, 100 crew members had gathered in silence. They weren't saluting. They were waiting. The UNS Legacy was the largest warship humanity had ever built, a city of steel and firepower, crewed by 10,000 souls. But when Sarah Vaughn limped up its boarding ramp leaning on a cane, she felt small. The weight of legend pressed against her shoulders, the ghost of Krill's end. That's what the news feeds called her. The woman who didn't start the war but ended it. She hated the title. Admiral Chen met her in the hangar bay, a man she'd served under during the dark years. His face was grave. "Sarah, you look like hell. Feel like it too." "Sir?" "Good. Because what's coming will make Krill look like training exercises." He led her to the briefing room, where holographic displays showed a new enemy. Not insectoid, but something worse. Machines. Self-replicating drones that had already consumed 3 fringe colonies. The Galactic Council was panicking. They'd called on humanity. "They want us to fight their war," Sarah said. "They want you," Chen replied, specifically. "Because after Dorian, every species in the galaxy finally understands something we've always known." "What's that?" Chen smiled. "Humans don't start fights, but we finish them." Sarah stood at the Legacy's observation deck that night, watching the stars blur past as the ship accelerated toward the front lines. A young ensign approached her, barely 20, with wide eyes and trembling hands. "Captain Vaughn? I just wanted to say, my family was on Dorian. You saved them. I joined the fleet because of you." Sarah turned. The ensign was crying. "What's your name?" Sarah asked. "Ensign Rami, sir." "Ensign Rami, listen to me." Sarah put her good hand on his shoulder. "I didn't save your family. They saved themselves. I just bought them time. And that's all any of us can do. Buy time for the next generation to be better." She looked out at the stars again. Somewhere out there, the machine swarm was waiting, and somewhere behind her, Earth was watching. "I never wanted to be a legend," she said softly. "I just wanted to keep my promise. No more burning colonies. No more children watching their parents die. The ship's intercom crackled. All hands prepare for jump in 30 seconds. Destination: the machine front. Sarah straightened her uniform, adjusted her cane, and walked toward the bridge. Ensign Rami followed. "Captain," he asked, "what do we do if they won't negotiate?" She glanced back, and for the first time since Dorian, she smiled. Not cold, not sad, but peaceful. "Then we show them the same thing we showed the Krill. Humans don't start fights, but we are very, very good at ending them." The Legacy jumped into the void, and the galaxy held its breath. Final scene. Sarah Vaughn stood on the bridge of her new ship, facing an enemy that had never known fear. She opened a channel. "This is Captain Sarah Vaughn of the United Nations ship Legacy. You have attacked 3 of our colonies. You have ignored every warning. You have one chance to surrender." The machine swarm answered with a wave of missiles. Sarah nodded to her weapons officer. "Fire the lullaby." And somewhere in the quiet space between stars, a legend continued. She never started the war, but she made sure no one would ever forget how it ended.